Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Mitch Simkins, and this is Wins for Widows, where you get practical advice from the guidance and the mouths of tech professionals who all of us are working together to help you get your feet back on the ground after experiencing the loss of a loved one. Together, we'll uncover the rooted question that you might be asking yourself: what now? And what should I do next? So today I am excited to introduce you to Chelsea Gajewski. Chelsea is the principal and managing attorney of Sodoma Law in Belmont office in North Carolina, where she leads a team focused exclusively on family law matters, including divorce, custody support, and premarital agreements. And that's where we're going to talk a fair amount today. She was trained as a social worker originally, and then went to law school to practice family law so that she can have more direct impact in this space. She has been recognized as a super lawyer rising star and legal elite, serving also in leadership roles with North Carolina's Bar Association's family law section and sitting on multiple local boards. And she is involved in a widows outreach project that delivers support and care for grieving families. Chelsea, it's a pleasure to have you on. Before we even get into the questions, tell me a little about the Widows Project that you're involved with. I think you and your
Yes, so it was started here in Charlotte, North Carolina by Ashley Manning. It is called Watch Love Grows.
Okay.
And on Valentine's Day, people are nominated who've lost a spouse, and then they are delivered a beautiful flower arrangement and a gift. And so my mom does the one in Buffalo, but it's in a variety of cities: Pittsburgh, Columbia, some in Tennessee. And then they just started a Mother's Day Love where they do a similar thing, but for mothers who've lost a child.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. And you go participate. You help, you
Yep,
give.
I'm on the board, and then I volunteer, help with the flower arrangements, or the deliveries are really special because then you're
That.
actually seeing the person.
I'll bet. So cool. So cool. What a great initiative. What a great service. And I'm sure it's much appreciated. So very cool. So,
Thank you.
so Chelsea, I know as I always do, we meet before, we talk through some things, kind of get a feel for where your space is. Today's conversation is a little unique because we're not really talking about like that early grief, like right after the passing. It's really kind of having gone through that and maybe start to thinking about remarriage
Mhm.
in a new relationship, and you've had some experience with that. So let's start with this kind of a high level question. There's, this emotional and legal side of this new arrangement, and those widows who find themselves dating again might be worrying about, like, am I protecting myself? What do I do with my late spouse's legacy? Do I just let that go? What about my kids? Right? There's probably a
Yeah.
billion other questions that they're evaluating, but those seem to be maybe the first three. So what first three legal or financial steps do you suggest that they take before saying yes to remarrying or even really getting deeply involved in a new relationship?
I think financial transparency with your partner is extremely important. What are your expenses? What are your expectations in that relationship as it relates to money? And then, kind of like what you were just saying, what is your goal for what you're coming into the marriage with? Whether that's a house, some investment accounts, retirement, your previous spouse's investment, retirement accounts. What do you want to do with those long term? I mean, no one ever goes into a marriage thinking that they're going to get divorced,
Hmm.
but sometimes it's inevitable, and that's okay. But we want to be financially sound at the end of it. And so thinking about, okay, if we were to divorce or separate at a later date, do I want this person to have half of what I have right now, half of what we grow together? Or do I just want to keep it for myself and pass it to my children or my grandchildren?
Hmm.
Those are some questions to be thinking about, I think, before
Hmm.
you even get into whether or not you're going to say yes. So you can have clarity and be able to have that
Yeah,
conversation with your new partner.
that's great. So the first thing you might say is think about the questions.
Hmm.
What are the questions you need to consider? And if this relationship goes to more formality, what are the areas that I want to clarify, or are the things that might need some clarification?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. And what does your estate even consist of? Do you know what that looks like? Because some spouses, they have a financial person running in, so they may not have an understanding of what that looks like, or their previous spouse may have managed all of those aspects of their life. So also getting knowledgeable of what it is that you have. What do you
Yeah.
see happening with it, whether you stay together or you eventually separate?
Definitely one of the very first things, I mean, early on in the grief process that I talk a lot about, like you got to get a feel for what's all there. Even if you don't know the answers to all of it. Even if you're not
Right.
the expert in every one of those, just have a general understanding and knowledge so that, to your point, you kind of know what you're dealing with and you know what you have and what you might be giving up or not. So love
Right.
that.
And what you
That's
need to
great.
live each month. Like, what are your expenses? What does that look like?
Yeah. I think in my experience with this, with remarriage, I've had several over my 20 years get remarried, and it's always interesting, never super easy, I don't think,
Mhm.
right? There's all these questions about kids and what to do there. I've seen multitudes of different ways to arrange. Is there a kind of a standard way that you see or that you recommend kind of joining those families, particularly as it relates to their children? Because that's usually where I start to see the friction. So sometimes it's usually not between the husband and wife, the new ones that get
No.
married. It's usually the adult children who want to get their nose in it, and sometimes that can be a little snuffy.
Yes.
What do you think? What do you see? What do you recommend?
Well, I think it's, what expectations have you set with your children also too? Have you set boundaries with them, or are they thinking this is all coming to them because you've had this conversation with them that led them to believe that? So just
Mm.
kind of taking a step back too, like just as you want to get clear with your partner, you want to get clear with your kids. Because when
Awesome.
you pass or things like that, you don't want there to be friction between them if you have multiple children.
Love that.
But I think it's, I've seen people say, okay, I have a client right now. It would be her second marriage. She's doing a prenup, thankfully, and she's has two pieces of real property. And she's clearly said, this one piece of real property, me and my fiance, we have put money into it. I want it to go to him in the event something
Mm,
happens to me.
okay.
But this beach house, I want it to go to my son. So she has been very clear with him from the beginning.
Okay.
Some people will say, okay, let's put it into a trust and then the trust will decide how it gets distributed. I think getting very clear about what
Yeah.
is as you exist, what it is that you are going to say to your partner, this is ours and will pass to you if something happens to me. And then this is something we're going to leave for our legacy or our children.
Yeah. No, I love that. And Chelsea, you're kind of alluding to a thing that I've seen. Sometimes the biggest problem is just having those conversations.
Oh, yeah.
Like sometimes I see that delayed conversation. Like, how do you advise that you encourage people to get into that conversation? Is there something you've seen that's worked better than others over the years?
Having some confidence in it. And it's like, if this is your person and this is what you want, that conversation's going to go okay. I think people get scared of how is this person going to react to what I'm saying? Or are we going to be aligned or disaligned? And if we're not aligned, is that going to cause friction?
Yeah.
But I think you have to be confident in what it is that you want for yourself, your family, your future,
Mm,
because
mm,
that's what you should get.
yeah. And I see it's a lot like back to the deceased spouse. Like there's this what's the word? Duty to perhaps.
Mhm.
And I think, frankly, I think you should let that drive your feelings and be
Yeah.
true to that, right? And maybe
Right.
just be true to what you feel and don't allow that new relationship to make you do things that perhaps you might not otherwise do.
Right, and
Is
I
that
think if you
is
have the
that fair?
hard yes, and if you have the hard conversations in the beginning, then it's only gonna make that relationship stronger.
Agree. Agree. Because I see sometimes when that conversation never happens and accounts and things start to get a little more meshed, the
Mhm,
conversation becomes worse 3 or 4 years down the road than it would have been just up front to say, "Hey, look, here's what we're doing," and make it clear. All right, so prenup. So
mhm,
speaking of an uncomfortable conversation,
mhm,
tell us about a prenup. Tell us
yes.
how it works. Educate us a little on what it even means.
Yeah, so a prenup is a contract, and it is a contract that 2 parties can enter into prior to getting married, and that contract can decide about what we're gonna do with our property that we now own.
Mm,
what we're going to do with our property that we gather together during our marriage, and then ultimately what happens to those two buckets of property should we separate. And
mhm.
then, and also in North Carolina, you could decide whether or not somebody is going to receive spousal support if you ultimately separate, or whether you're not going to receive spousal support. And that can range
Oh,
from
interesting.
length of time, amount, triggers to what gets you spousal support, or what says actually you're not going to get any spousal support. What I like about a prenup is you can do whatever you want in it. It's really a contract to terms that the two of you agree upon. And honestly, hopefully you never look at it again, right? But if you do, then you're going to be saving a lot of headache down the road, a lot of money. And again, like I know I've said this probably 10 times already on this Zoom, but clarity. It's going to give you all clarity at the end of the day.
Yeah. I didn't realize that it was almost like building a trust and estate docs for
Mhm.
if something were to happen.
Well,
So it's
it decides.
now, soon, and later, it can control all of that? It
Well,
can
it
manage
decides.
all
Well, it decides what happens if you separate,
that?
not what happens if you pass away. That would be your estate planning documents. So your
Okay.
will, your
Okay. Okay.
trust, things like that.
Okay. Okay, so it's in the separation, not the death. So then you still have to have the will and the trust and all the other estate docs. This doesn't replace those because it's while alive, not dead.
Correct. And then,
Okay.
but sometimes people in prenups or, settlement agreements, they will say, I think we just had a couple clients resolve property division. They did not have a prenup, but they said, okay, we've got these 10 properties, they're rental properties. She wanted them, he wanted them. They both ultimately wanted them to go to their children. So in the settlement documents, they said, okay, we're going to hire a third attorney. The third attorney is going to build a trust. Our children are going to be equal beneficiaries of that trust. And so they put all of the properties into that trust that will then go through their estate planning. But they
Hmm,
agreed to that as part of a separation settlement.
interesting. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. Yeah, and I know it's perhaps a difficult conversation because it almost appears like, oh, you're already planning like we're going to get divorced.
I know. I know. And I hear that. But like I said, hopefully you never look at it again. And if you don't, that's great. But if you have to, it's there. It's like it's safety net, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think of it like, I mean, I don't mean to compare, getting remarried to a business because I
Hmm.
realize it's very different. But in a business relationship, right? If you don't go in with a new business partner without a pretty detailed contract, uh, it can
Oh,
get
yeah. And I
ugly.
mean,
So
yeah, and North Carolina looks at a partnership like they're a business. I
interesting.
mean, and to your point, I've heard somebody say this before. I can't remember who it was, but it was basically like when you get married, you are entering into a prenup. That prenup is the state where you live, their laws around divorce, separation. So if you
Mhm.
don't like what that says, why not create something that you do like or you are aligned on? Because one way
Mm.
or another, somebody's going to be telling you what to do with your.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach it, Chelsea. Hey, look,
Mhm.
there already are laws. I'm just making it formal.
Yeah.
Definitely lessons to blow.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
cool. Very cool. All right. So, what about kids? How do you help clients structure prenups and follow up on planning so that they can not worry so much about disinheriting their children and these kids that are like, great, you're going to get remarried and that new partner is going to get all of your and dad's money.
Yes. So prenups cannot determine what happens with custody or child support because things with kids, they're always changing. So can't deal with that piece of it.
Okay.
But I think to your point, what you can say is okay, for example, if we're getting married, I'm coming into it with $100,000 of retirement that I ultimately want to go to my children or use for their education when they go to college.
Mm-hmm.
We can specifically say in the prenup that that account is my separate money and I can do what I want with it when I want to do something with it. And should we separate, at the end of the day, you can't come back and say, okay, well, she had this $100,000 account that I should get half of.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's mine. We've agreed that it's mine. It's my separate property. So that doesn't come back in the pot to be divided.
Okay. Okay. Okay, interesting. Okay, and again, that's and my mind is going to the beneficiary designations on accounts, but those are
Okay.
at death, right? Those are at death. This is in life if they separate.
Well, that is a good point because, a 401k, your spouse should be the beneficiary, but you can the prenup can say, well, I'm going to actually name somebody else as a
Yeah.
beneficiary, and my spouse will have to cooperate in that process if they need to.
Right.
Your prenup
Right.
basically can say that X amount of property, whatever that is mine, and I'm really going to do what I want with it when I want to do with it. Whether that's, hey, actually, you and I have a house together, I'm
Mm,
going to take some of my separate property and renovate our kitchen.
okay.
That's okay too.
Okay.
But yeah, you can decide who you want to name the beneficiary
Huh.
if you've identified it in the
Okay.
prenup.
Yeah, when you mention that in terms of a business contract,
Mhm.
has a whole different connotation for me.
Yeah. I
An
mean, because
entire different connotation, because it's like, all right, what happens if we just start disagreeing about things or whatever? Like, oh, well, let's go back to the contract. Let's look and
yep.
see what it says. Here's what it says.
And there's so many people that will
Mhm.
say, well, I stayed at home during our marriage so that he could accelerate his career. And it's like, yeah, you did. And there's avenues in the law to compensate you for that or to kind of make you whole for that or plan for that. But that was your role in the marriage, right? And his role or her role was to bring
Mm,
home the money
mm.
and to do like the lawn work where maybe you did inside work. Everybody has a role in a marriage.
The
Um,
wife doing the lawn work, Chelsea, is that what you're talking
hey,
about?
yes.
Yes. I love this agreement. That's a good deal.
Yeah, that is a
Maybe I'll
good
talk to my wife and see. Actually, she's really good at helping me outside, so
there you go.
so
There you go.
it's good, it's good. All right, let's look at another question. Uh, I think we've already hit on this one a fair amount around, scripts or boundaries, recommending let's talk about boundaries, okay?
Mhm,
Let's talk about boundaries. Be specific about, homes that they now jointly live in, the other
mhm.
accounts that they might have, cars, properties, all of the other pieces. Do you see any kind of consistencies around how those boundaries are set, or is it just really individual and there's just everyone has a different way to approach it?
I would say the most common approach is anything that they are coming into the relationship will remain there separate. So in North Carolina, once you get married, it basically starts your business. It starts this clock of, okay, now we're on this journey of a partnership, of a marriage. So anything we acquire after a date of marriage is going to be marital. And should we separate, it goes into a pot and it should be presumably divided 50-50.
Interesting.
But a
Okay.
contract, a prenup, you can basically say, no, okay, I'm going to add to my retirement during my marriage. And without the prenup, those contributions would be marital. But in the prenup, I'm actually going to say those contributions are mine should we separate. So it
Mm,
doesn't matter when I was contributing, how much I was contributing. At the end of the day, it's mine. I would say
mm,
the most common gray area or more of a complicated area is if I own a home and I'm getting married, my person moves in, right? But that house may still be titled under my name.
okay.
I don't want to make it marital, but then this person is contributing to the mortgage, or maybe we're renovating a bathroom and they're contributing to that. So, how do
Mm,
you compensate that
yeah.
person
Yeah.
for those financial contributions
Yeah.
at a later date?
Yep.
And some people will put a cap on it. Some people will say, okay, now this person maybe gets 10% more of this investment account because they put some money into the house. There's ways to offset it,
Mm,
but that's the most common one where it's a lot of gray area because you are
yeah.
sharing a home.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the
Mhm.
one that I've seen. That's the one I've seen most. You know, um, and that's the one I hear from the most about children of the surviving spouse
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, I'm ready for my money." And so, what do you see as far as after the death of one or the other?
Mhm.
Do you see it typically allow for the other to remain in the home? Do you see it sometimes where they have to leave?
I've seen it both ways. Somebody, her mother passed away, but her new husband was still on the deed. But the daughter was okay with him staying there and paying and doing all the things. But then I've seen other people say, no, they've got 6 months
Mm,
and they either have to buy the child out or the child has to buy that person out of the property at that point. Or if they can't reach an agreement about what the purchase price is or things like that, or somebody can't refinance a mortgage, then the house has to be sold.
yeah, yeah. Am I off in this? I haven't seen as many as you have, but from what I've seen, that's typically been the most potentially contentious
Oh,
part
yeah.
about that joining is that house that they have together.
Yeah, because who knows? Maybe it was their childhood home where they grew up in. It was the home where they saw their parent probably the most. They made the most memories. Their grandkids were there. Yeah, homes are very emotional,
Yeah.
understandably so.
Yeah, in my experience with, several clients, the solution I've seen the most doesn't mean it's right. The one I've
Mhm.
seen the most is where, the other owned the house.
Mhm.
They'll say, "Look, if you need to stay in this house after I die, even if I own the home, stay
Mhm.
in it. And when you die, then it will go to the kids after that,"
Mhm.
but allows for kind of a gentle evolution and transition if
Yes, I
that
mean,
person dies. That's kinda what I've seen typically, but again, I don't know that it means it has to be or that it's typical.
no, that's a very generous way to do it, right? That person doesn't have to move. But then, the lawyer in me, I'm like, okay, well, are they keeping up with the port payments? Are they
Mm,
keeping up with the upkeep of the house? If something breaks, who pays for that?
mm, mm,
So those kinds of things. And then also, what if this person lives for another 15, 20 years and they're in that house? There's
mm.
so many things to consider.
Interesting. So if you're a
Mhm.
kid and your parent was the one who was in the house and died and it was his or her house, you're looking at this as like, okay, if the newly married spouse is there and just lets it go completely and then we can't sell it
Right.
or sell it for a lot less, then I guess there could be a concern.
Yeah, or they have to pour in a bunch of money into it to even get it in a sellable condition.
And so you could build those into the prenup, right? Those kind of
Um,
provisions to say like, as long as these conditions are met,
mhm.
then you can
Yes.
continue to stay in it.
Yes, and then I would say, your estate planning documents should mirror what the prenup
Okay.
is telling you to do.
Okay. So interesting, Chelsea, because I was thinking about that. Is that in a prenup or is that in a trust or is it in both?
I would say both because the prenup, you want to get clear with your partner what it is that we're doing, what the expectation is. And then also if you decide to separate, then you still have the prenup and it's talking about it in that instance. But the prenup can direct you all to say, okay, in addition, in consideration for X, we're gonna enter into some estate planning documents that say this.
Are one or the other any more legal? Any more binding?
Well, no, I mean the prenup would only go into effect or you'd only have to look at it in the event of a separation. That's why you need the estate planning documents as well.
For the death
Right.
speak. But both of them have equal amounts of legal teeth, I guess, for lack of a
Right.
better word, right?
Right. Yes.
Prenups are as legally binding as a trust.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Yes.
All right, and we've hit on this, but a little bit more around like outside the box stuff.
Mhm.
Thinking beyond just the okay, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours.
Mhm.
Anything else that you've seen or other situations or conditions? I know you see a lot more than the most of us. What do you see?
Yeah. So prenups that really can be tailored to obviously what's going on at the time, but also how you anticipate building your future. So not only could it be as simple as, okay, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. A lot of people will say, well, yeah, we are building a relationship, we're building a partnership. So
Mm,
once we get married,
mm,
everything from here on out, that will be marital. And
interesting.
at the end of the day, we're going to divide it 50-50.
Mm,
So we're
mm,
not gonna leave it up to it's called distributional factors in North Carolina. We're not gonna leave it up to these arguments of maybe why I should get 55% of everything and you should get 45% of everything.
right,
We
right.
are going to divide it equally at the end of the day. And then I've also seen if somebody is coming into the marriage with a house and then that's still their marital home at the end of the relationship, the person who owned the home gets to stay in it.
Mm,
So there's not this, okay, well, now you get this house. It was mine to begin with. I'm going to stay in it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
People get creative with alimony terms. If somebody cheats, then no alimony. Or I've seen terms where the longer you're married, the more support you'll receive in a separation. I've also seen people kind of look at their income. We had one client where he earned maybe $4 million. So he was basically like, I'm not going to give you spousal support, but I'm building a marital estate with you, right? So it's going to be
Mm,
millions each year. So in the event we separate, you will have a couple $1,000,000 no matter what. So you're not going to need support.
I
That
see.
didn't bode well in the beginning, but at the end they signed and they got married and they're doing really well. So yeah,
You might need a marriage counselor on staff. Do you have one of those? Like,
no.
arbitration marriage
I have a
counselor?
lot of therapists though that I refer certain peoples to.
I'll bet you do.
Yeah.
I mean, you're making an interesting distinction that it sounds like it's more time-based than it is asset-based. It's more
Some
like,
people
"Okay, up until we come to this, yours is yours, mine is mine. Now we start this new partnership. Now we're combined, and that's 50-50. Everything else is
some
separated."
people Some people do it that way, or some people will say everything in our marriage is going to remain separate unless we make the conscious decision during our marriage to title it jointly.
Yeah. That's so hard, though, because things start to get intermixed, intermingled,
I
like you
know.
said, around the house, like, "Okay, so this broke. Who's gonna pay for it?"
Yeah,
Right?
but you know what? I've never had like even people that come to me and they're like, I have a prenup, we're separating. I've never really had people fight over personal property. And I've never really had people say, well, we commingled. Because I think the people that are going into it with this prenup and they know what this prenup says, it's important to them at the beginning of the marriage, is gonna remain important to them throughout the marriage, so they are making those conscious decisions. I find that when people get super complicated with the prenup, that's when it's more of a business and less of a relationship.
Good point. Good
Yeah.
point. Yeah, good point. And I think at the end of the day, it's just, "Look, we're together and let's make it work, and that needs to be fixed. I don't care."
Right,
Right.
yes, exactly. Because 'cause they're gonna both benefit from it, whether it's a year or 10.
I know there's always those conversations. I've heard them. I've heard of them happening. I haven't been
Oh,
there while
yeah.
they happen, but I hear those conversations from some of my remarried widows who say, like, "We had to make this decision, or we're going on this trip, and, we don't know who's gonna pay for it." And, almost that conversation seems to be going on all the 2 different worlds.
Right, but I think if that's who that person is and then their spouse, it's not new to them, right? Like, I hope to get married soon, and I think we've already talked about all of these things. Like, we are gonna do a prenup. We are gonna, have an understanding of how we're gonna live together, but we are aligned that it is gonna be a partnership. Like, I'm not gonna say, "Oh, I'm paying for this trip, so you should pay for that." But I get that people may do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're right in the throes of this, Chelsea. This is you.
Yes, yes.
You are the gal building your own. You got a good attorney to help you build it?
Yeah, her name's Chelsea.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
Yes.
That's a good skill to have for you, for sure.
Yes.
Well, Chelsea, super helpful. I know I'm thinking of a lot of people that I already know that are going to take advantage and benefit from this. Anything else you want to say or add to our conversation from today?
Just try not to think prenup as the demise. Just try and think of it as a safety net, a safety blanket for you and your future. Nothing wrong with that.
Love it. Chelsea, you're
Thank you
awesome.
so much.
Thank
Thanks for
you for
having
your
me.
time. Enjoy your 80-degree weather today, and I'll send you a little snow.
Okay. All right. That sounds good.
See ya. Thanks.
Bye.